Hey there, Tim here from the Single Malt Review with another casual dram, and this time it's a casual comparison between a couple of Ballantines blends, as promised. I tasted the 12-year-old not too long ago, and I thought it was pretty good, but I had this lingering sensation in my head that was, how much better, really, was it than the standard old Ballantines? Good old revered blend that it is. So I went and got a bottle, and we're going to find out, actually, because I think it's worth knowing. So, what we're dealing with are actually really very similar animals. Both blended Scotch whiskies, so portion of them will be grain, portion of them will be malt. I believe in the Ballantines blends it's fairly significantly grain. They just have that soft kind of note to them, as far as my palate can tell. Anyway, so let's have a look at them side by side and see what the difference really is, what you're really getting for your money. So first off, we could look at the colour, we could look at a lot of things, but these are both coloured, both chill filtered whiskies, so pointless. This one's darker, and that's entirely strategic. They want to look darker so that it looks older, it looks better. People, they associate darker whiskey with older whiskey and with better quality whiskey, and it's a bit of a nonsense because it's entirely controlled by the appearance that the producers want to give their whiskey. You can trust it if you see no colour on the bottle, otherwise forget about it. They could put food colouring in there, they could make it green, it means absolutely nothing. Most whiskey you're getting is usually a lot lighter than you think. Some blends colour more than others, but almost all of them colour. And so the whiskey you're drinking in your young blends, it looks dark, might look very dark, depending on how it's being marketed. It's not. It's very light whiskey because it's very young whiskey. So, enough about that. We're going to ignore the colour. What we will have a wee look at, though, is something that's a bit more difficult to fake. I'm going to have a quick look at the legs on the glass. See how it holds the rim. Now, you won't be able to see from over there, but I'll just have to let you know how it's doing. This is a very unscientific way of determining the thickness of body on a whiskey. A good thick whiskey, a good full-bodied whiskey will hold the rim longer and better than a thinner one. And I think I can see, it's marginal though, but I think I can see a little bit better of a hold from the 12 years old. So that box is ticked. It has more body than the younger one. So let's try the aroma. Grainy, very grainy, which is the first and foremost thing you're going to get out of every sort of, not bottom shelf, but every no-age statement sort of mass market cheap blend. The first thing you're going to get is grain whiskey because it's very expressive. People say malt whiskey is the really fiery, really personable stuff, and it is, but grain whiskey has a very dominant smell, and you can smell it coming from a very long way away. I can at any rate. So grain is what you get off that. Compared to the 12, still grainy, definitely still grainy, but there's a nuance there that there isn't in the younger one. There's a little bit of savoury, there's even just the tiniest hair of peat in there, which makes it a little more interesting to smell. So we're still looking okay for the 12-year-old being a bit more interesting. Anyway, back to the no-age statement and try the palate. Again, grainy. Grainy, but not aggressive. It's young, but it's surgically made, like most of the good blends, so that it's just young enough. They're saving enough money on those young barrels without wrecking what they're putting together. It's just as smooth as it needs to be a pleasant whiskey, and it is a pleasant whiskey. This is on a hot day like this out of a snifter, not the ideal way to drink Ballantines like this. Probably the ideal way is with an ice cube and a tumbler, but anyway, we're trying to be at least a little bit scientific here. So, grain, Not the sort of honey and floral you get from malt whiskey, but the sort of butterscotch, caster sugar, flowery, and I don't mean that as in flowers, I mean that as in an actual bag of flour. There's a very grainy, gristy cereal component to it. Grain whiskey obviously made from non-malt grains, wheat, rye, whatever they've got on hand. They don't use, they won't putting potatoes or sugar beet or anything like that in there. They will use what's called in the industry grain spirit, so probably a bit better quality than your Czechoslovakian $2 vodkas or whatever else you're into, but certainly not the very, very expensive 100% malt that goes into your single malt. So anyway, a little bit of toasted coconut coming through from what I'm going to say is almost 100% bourbon maturation. There'll be just a fraction of sherry casks in here, but it will be abjectly fractional. So never mind that really. So perfectly pleasant, just soft enough, but not too soft. If a blend gets too soft, it becomes flabby. I like to know that I'm drinking a spirit. You don't want to think you're drinking some sort of, pudding. You want a little bit of bite in your spirits. They don't taste like spirits otherwise. So yeah, well balanced, well put together, and I think it really pretty good quality. But the question is, what's the step up to the 12-year-old? Is it enough? Because depending on the market you're in, we're looking at, when you consider that this one comes in a litre, this one comes in a 750 or a 700, depending on your territory. I got a bit lucky with my 750. We're a bit pick and mix down here in New Zealand. We usually get 700s, but the odd American bottle comes through and we get 50 bonus mils, which is all right by me. It's more or less pretty close to twice the price of what you're paying there by volume, because you're not getting quite as much in the bottle. So I'm not going to ask it to be twice as good, because it's always a bit of a logarithmic curve as the age and quality of whiskies go up. You will pay more and more and more for increasingly diminishing returns, and that is just the name of the game, because as supply and demand shifts, demand increases for these rarer and rarer whiskies, and more wealthy people will pay for them. So that's just the free market, really. Can't complain, but it is how it works. So let's see what we've got here. As I noticed before, the nose it really is significantly more interesting. There is that thread of peat which adds a savoury element which is simply not there in the ordinary blend, at least not in the nose. In terms of the nose, this is actually a lot better, and I think there's a lot more malt in there as well, because rather than just that sugary, grainy, butterscotchy thing, I'm getting that good sort of heather honey, these nice, almost Highland characters beginning to come through. So much more entertaining nose, we can say that at least. And the peat is there on the palate as well, and I think that's the big difference. Without this as comparison, I didn't even pick that peat up the first time I tasted this whiskey. Tasting it in a vacuum, I didn't pick up that very, very tiny, those few parts per million little thread of peat they've got going on in there. But now that I do, I'm beginning to realise just how important a stitch that is in the flavour to keep everything else from unravelling. It's building out the savoury, salty end of the blend, which is so important in creating a complete flavour that you actually want to think about and not just drink and enjoy. There's just a few, still not many, but just a few sherry tones coming in. There's some slightly fruitier qualities in here. There's just a few darker fruits, a few sort of very, very, very distant black plums, prunes. It's just the slightest bit tart, which again the no age statement is not. It's very, very sweet, it's very, very soft. And that slight bite, that slight harshness which was in the original is gone. This one is, like I thought the first time around with it, it's almost too soft for its own good. It's just not really giving me, it's not giving me the shove that I want if I'm having neat spirits. But then again, I'm probably not the market. This is probably for people that normally drink blends, they normally have things with ice, and they just want something a little bit better, a little bit classier. Again, lots of bourbon maturation, quite a lot of coconut. There's actually quite a lot of drying wood in here. It's not nearly as sweet a whiskey as the original with all that grain floating around. Not spicy at all, and not particularly fruity. It's a remarkably, compared to the other one, it's a remarkably tender dry, quite oaky, quite woody, quite savoury blend, which is surprising. Tasting that in the vacuum, I really did think it was a bit too, it was just a bit of a, it was pussyfooting me just a little too much, and I wasn't really that excited by it. And I thought, thinking back, that little bit of kick I got out of the original made it even maybe just a slightly more interesting whiskey. But now that I have them side by side, I'm torn. I think they really are whiskies for different occasions. This, I think, is a whiskey to drink about, or rather, drink and not think about. This one is for a slightly more thoughtful occasion. This might be for your parties, this might be for your punch, God forbid, something else, cocktails. That's probably your one. This one, though, there really is something more there, and it took that comparison for me to really find out. It's not quite as facile is a very, very harsh word, but it's not quite as facile as I thought it was when I tasted it in a vacuum. And I think that's quite telling. Now, I think, in conclusion, we're dealing with different whiskies for different occasions. This one is something to serve to anybody on the street. Have it at parties, have it with ice, have it in a long drink, have it in your iced tea, whatever you want. This, though, I think it would be just a little bit of a waste, considering what's in there and what you probably paid for it. I think that's more for, say, a warm-up whiskey, on tasting night, or something to serve to people that you know enjoy malt whiskey on a slightly higher level, and I think it will reward in that capacity. So I've already given that one a score, and I'll give this one a score now. I'll give that one a 71, so significantly lower, but perfectly good considering its level in the market. I will have to go and see exactly which score I gave to the other one. I should really record these in some sort of notebook, shouldn't I? But I'll ping it up on the screen. It'll probably appear right about here, the score for this one. Similarly, this one here, you'll see it too, so you can see what the value judgment is. You're never going to get twice as much value for twice as much money. That's just not the way the whiskey game works. But down in these sort of entry levels like this, you will get quite a lot more for twice the money. So it's not like choosing between the 40-year-old or the 42-year-old Glendronach or whatever you're buying, when there's $1,000 difference between 2 years. It's pretty big moves down here when you pay a bit more money. So it's worth having a look. And in terms of recommendations, I'd easily recommend both of these. Not for the same reason, but in terms of it being fairly solid quality whiskey, I think particularly the 12-year-old. I have no trouble recommending these at all. Really, I should do more blends, is what I should do, because given that they're far more than, I think, 90%, still it's tragic in terms of the consumption of all the whiskey distilled. Really, there should be more channels that devote more time to the cheaper blends, and we should really do that ourselves. So we'll make that a New Year's resolution, since it's 2016 now. We'll spend less money on you all, and maybe deliver something to a wider audience. Not that we'll stop our single cask stuff, of course. We wouldn't want to do that. It would be rather boring. But anyway, this has been Tim from the Single Malt Review. I hope you've enjoyed another casual dram here for this casual comparison. And next time you're in the market for Ballantines, I hope that was very useful to you. In the meantime, Slanger, do keep safe. Dave and myself will be back with something compelling shortly, I'm quite sure. And we will see you then. Till next time.